My body felt as if all the pain I'd accumulated over the years had collapsed, and I suddenly remembered what it felt like to be alive. The moment his lips touched mine, my heart beat again, and I realized that even in the darkest of times, there was a spark of hope in my soul. My name was Kathy, and if someone had told me that life could break me to shreds the way it did, I wouldn't have believed it. I stood on the edge of a precipice when my husband, Rick, walked away. His words cut into me like a knife edge. "This is not my child." Those words didn't just kill our relationship, they destroyed the world I knew and loved. Strangely, I had always seen Rick as a pillar, but it was he who caused my downfall. For months after he left, I clung to Jordan, our adopted son, who had become not only my hope, but the meaning of life. It was important to not just care for him, but to feel his care, his support in response to all adversity. He was that light leaving the dark corners of my heart. Jordan was a 7-year-old boy when my husband and I brought him home from the orphanage. That encounter, at that moment either fate or the irony of life, changed everything. He looked at the world with eyes wide open, full of hope and expectation. Over time, his quiet presence turned into the support I so desperately needed. Now that I was in my 30s and Jordan was 17, I could tell that he had become the kind of man many would dream of having by their side. When I looked at Jordan, his confidence and strength mesmerized me. He epitomized the best things that could have happened in my life, and I was filled with a proud sense of motherhood. The two of us created a world that sustained us and kept us warm despite the cold outside the window. Every night when he came home from school, he brought with him not only warm words, but relief from the heaviness of the days that passed without his father. "You're amazing," he said once, putting the book down on the table. I remembered that moment with a smile that felt like oblivious sadness. "You carry life," he repeated with delight as his hand touched my belly where our future child was already growing into. And on the evening he crouched next to me, it was magical. Jordan brought me tea and snacks. His care was like an amulet protecting me from sorrows. I remember his eyes shining when he felt the nudge of the little being inside me, as if confirming that life goes on, even when everything else was falling apart. We laughed and talked about childhood dreams, and in that moment I realized that he was not only my son, but my best friend, which made me stronger. But the evenings were the hardest. The silence in the house spoke louder than any words, and I was lost in bouts with memories. Every why from my soul censored me, and I kept repeating the same words to myself: "I'm not alone." Jordan smiled at me, though sometimes his sadness showed in the shadows under his eyes. He was my foundation, even when the world around me was crumbling. And then one such evening, as night enveloped the house, Jordan came to see me again. I sensed his quiet concern when he asked, "Are you okay?" His incredible concern reminded me that even in our craziness, there is room for warmth. I understand his feelings, even though he is only a boy, and yet he is able to understand my inner world better than any adult. When he laid his head on my stomach while I stroked his hair, there was more than just a mother-son bond between us. I felt his breathing become more confident, and for a moment I forgot about the pain that squeezed me. In that moment, we were closer than ever. In his kindness and gentleness, I found the warmth I longed for most. His every look was full of a love that I thought could survive in this harsh world. "I wouldn't know what to do without you," he blurted out, and his eyes reflected the sincerity I was looking for. I radiated warmth, and he responded in kind. He leaned closer, and the moment our lips touched, I realized that I could forgive any vessels that left wounds. It was the beginning of a new life, a new hope. Even if the pain was an unsolicited button, I learned to let go of fear and open to the new. Our connection was magical, and the excitement of every look, every touch grew stronger with each new we. I learned to enjoy life again, and it wasn't easy, but it was real. Each of his compliments filled me with new meaning, making me forget what had happened in the past. "You shine," his words resonated in my heart, bringing with them an extraordinary joy I hadn't felt in a long time. Behind that light, however, there was a shadow. The kiss that changed everything was like a mystery. I put it into the overall context of our lives. Jordan's gaze, his gentle touch. It all reminded me of how deeply our destinies were intertwined. And while my soul was in turmoil, in his arms I felt a strange calmness. We sat across from each other, the coffee table with breakfast between us simple but incredibly cozy. I wanted to scream with happiness, but fear and excitement held my thoughts together. I pondered what had happened. Thoughts swirled around in my head like fine dust, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something incredible was brewing right now. "You've grown so much," I said, looking at him fondly. My eyes searched his, hoping to find in them an answer to my confused feelings. And when our gazes met, I noticed how deeply he understood me, how close he had become over the months. "I don't know what I'd do without you," I whispered, feeling a lump arise in my throat. The way he cared about me and our future was extremely important to me. Not only had he been my support during difficult times, he had been a source of inspiration and love. "Don't think that way, Kathy. I'll always be here for you." His reassurance and warm smile brightened the sadness that enveloped my soul. He ran his hand over the back of my head, looking down at the floor as if reliving his own feelings. In that moment, I felt as if we were both talking about our innermost feelings, the fears that scared us into silence. Constantly finding common ground, our lives intertwined. The day he became my helper, my friend, it became more than just a casual affection. I felt a kind of transition between us. He was no longer just a son with an unfortunate fate in a poor orphanage. He became a man who gave me the hope and care that I so desperately needed. We sat side by side, and I wanted this moment to last forever. I watched as he ate his breakfast with concentration, as he hugged his coffee cup tightly, and it made my heart sink. It was a new program on the blank screen of my thoughts. All we had to do was continue our journey together, breaking new ground. Even though the morning was kissing us with warm light, in slight embarrassment I decided to hug him. I hugged him in a way I had never done before, as a mother would to her son, as a girlfriend would to her friend, as a woman would to the man who held such an important place in my heart. It was a fleeting but brand new sensation. He squeezed me back, our hearts beat in unison. I felt a long, tender thank you suddenly burst out of me. After breakfast, we went outside, enjoying the fresh air and the soft spring sunshine. There were floral scents in the air, and I saw Jordan laughing at something, but there was a slight sadness in his eyes. He suddenly turned to me, and that moment dragged on for what felt like an eternity. "Kathy, can I ask you a question?" His voice shook a little. "Do you think that someday I could be what you really need?" There was a sincerity in his question that struck me. I knew he was only a young man still going through hardships, but with each passing day he was becoming so important to me that I couldn't deny it. "Jordan, you already are." I squeezed his hand and felt the world around us dissolve. I didn't know what would happen next. I had no idea what the future held, but in that moment all my fears and worries went away. It was as simple and easy as breathing. Our connection continued to grow, becoming more important with each passing moment. We continued to talk, laughing, and felt something unique and wonderful was being created, based on trust and love. Gradually, I realized that even if there were challenges ahead of us, I was ready for them if he was there for me. Jordan became more than just a part of my life. He became the meaning of it, and now I knew that this bond was something more meaningful than just maternal love. It wasn't just mutual care, it was a deep understanding and openness that filled our hearts with a driving force. And the moment our lips crossed again in a kiss, I realized this was only the beginning of our journey. Every look, every step together brought us closer to a new life full of love and hope. My world, when Jordan leaned into me, seemed both fragile and incredibly strong. Gusty breath fluttered between us, his every word, his every touch like a light touch on my heartstrings, evoking a melody I'd long forgotten. On his lips as he kissed me, I felt the very tenderness I had been searching for so long. It wasn't simple passion. With each passing moment I realized it was a heart longing to be heard and understood. We pulled away from each other, but his forehead remained pressed against mine. I could feel his warm breath, his slight excitement that was transmitted to me, something elusive binding our souls together. I never thought I could experience such depth of feeling again. In that moment, all the worries, the pain of loss, the loneliness, all of it merged into one, leaving only the present, our connection. As the evening gradually turned to night, I felt time lose its hold on us. The look in Jordan's eyes, the sincere words he spoke, were confirmation that my life shrouded in darkness needed light again. I couldn't help but wonder how he, a young man, could love me so unconditionally at a time when I was feeling lost myself. I let myself sink into that emotion, wrapping my arm around him. In that moment, I didn't feel the pain of pregnancy or anxiety about the future. I felt a warmth emanating from him, protecting me from everything that had ever bothered me. This kind of connection was rare. It permeated my soul like sunlight breaking through the clouds. As silence enveloped us, I allowed myself to reflect on exactly how this transformation had happened. How he, a child from the orphanage, had grown a strength that I myself had long forgotten. In our complexity, he became a pillar for me, and I realized that every gesture he made, every word he spoke, not only supported me, but brought me back to myself. I remembered how in dark times, when everything seemed hopeless, he was always there for me, genuinely caring, genuinely wanting to make me happy. He had become my lifeline, and the more time passed, the clearer I realized that my love for Jordan had grown from a simple feeling and affection to something more. I sank back into his eyes, searching, hopeful. They were searching for answers too, just as I was. What happens next? The question swirled in my head, but I felt that with him, I could overcome any obstacle. Our connection was real, and that feeling sustained me. The night enveloped us in silence, with only the light fluttering of our hearts. I closed my eyes, letting myself consider how much I craved these moments' warmth, protection, the presence of a man who looked at me not as a woman with a broken fate, but as someone worthy of love. In that confidence, in the spark that burned in his eyes, I found my comfort. When I opened my eyes, he was already looking at me expectantly, full of tenderness. At that moment, it seemed to me that time had stopped, that nothing else existed in the world but the two of us. He was here, next to me, and that was enough. I put my arm around his shoulder and squeezed his hand tightly, as if trying to hold on to the love that was growing so inexorably between us. "I'm not going to let you go," I said softly, though the words didn't need to be confirmed. It was truly my inner conviction. I knew Jordan didn't need promises, he needed my loyalty, and I was willing to reach for that feeling, even if it meant facing a challenging future. The night seemed to be over, and morning came. In the warm sunshine, we stayed there, embracing, each moment deepening our trust in each other. I realized that there might be trials and challenges ahead, but with each passing day we only grew closer. I felt that the powers of love that sprang from despair were limitless to handle any storms. We were together, and that was enough to create our own story. As the evening drew to a close, as gentle rays of sunlight began to break through the curtains, I felt my soul fill with new hope. Jordan lay beside me, his breathing even and calm, like a reflection of the world we'd built together, a world where every feeling, every thought mattered. I realized that despite all the difficulties we had to overcome, we were not alone. An incredible bond had formed between us that went beyond a normal relationship. We were a team, and that confidence gave me the strength to fight for our happiness. Now, as uncertainty lay ahead, I knew one thing. Our future glowed with the warmth of the love we had grown together. Challenges may have awaited us, but with Jordan, I was ready to face them head-on, even if it required our greatest efforts. Every morning I would wake up knowing that I had a man by my side who canceled out the loneliness, gave me faith in the best, and was ready to share every joy and every pain. With that thought, I pressed myself against him, breathing in his warm scent, soaking up every drop of his care. A new feeling flared in my heart, a confidence. Together we stepped away from the dark past and into a bright future where every day took on new meaning. I knew that no matter how life changed, we had each other, and with that knowledge, everything seemed possible. Taking his hand, I leaned down to kiss his forehead, and in that moment realization swept over me. We weren't just surviving, we were truly beginning to live. And in this new beginning, in the quiet whisper of love, I realized that the intertwining of our destinies was the beginning of something magnificent, something worth celebrating. We were together, and it was only the beginning.